It started subtly, as these things always do. A spare key on the kitchen counter. I didn't think much of it. I probably took it out of my pocket and forgot. I tossed it into the junk drawer, that chaotic graveyard of miscellaneous objects we all have. A day later, I was looking for a screwdriver in my toolbox in the garage. There, nestled among the rusty nails and loose screws, was another key. Identical. Same tarnished brass, same jagged teeth, same small circular head. It was strange, a flicker of unease, but I dismissed it. My memory isn't what it used to be. Maybe I had a few spares made and forgot. I put that one in the junk drawer too, next to its twin. The unease grew from a flicker to a low hum. I found another one in the bathroom, tucked inside the medicine cabinet behind a bottle of aspirin. Then another, in the pocket of a winter coat I hadn't worn in months. One was inside a book on my knitstand, marking a page I don't remember reading. They were everywhere. The junk drawer was no longer a graveyard. It was a nursery, a breeding ground. A dozen identical keys now lay in a gleaming, brassy pile. Each time I found a new one, a cold dread trickled down my spine. My home, my sanctuary, was being quietly invaded, not by a person, but by an object. A simple, innocuous key that was systematically replacing my sense of reality. I tried to rationalize it. A prank? But who would do this? And how? The doors were always locked, the windows secure. I live alone. There was no one to play such a meticulous, nonsensical joke. I started to question my own mind. Was I doing this myself? In some fugue state, some sleepwalking trance, was I buying keys and hiding them, only to have my waking mind discover them with a fresh sense of horror? The thought was more terrifying than any intruder. To be a stranger in your own mind, your own actions a mystery to you. The house began to feel less like a home and more like a puzzle box designed by a madman, and I was both the captive and, quite possibly, the architect of my own confinement. My days became a frantic, obsessive search. I wasn't looking for things I'd lost. I was looking for things I shouldn't have. Every drawer I opened, I held my breath. Every pocket I checked, my heart hammered against my ribs. The keys kept appearing, under the sofa cushions, inside a bag of flour in the pantry. One morning, I found one frozen inside an ice cube in the freezer tray. The sheer impossibility of it was shattering. My world was fraying at the edges. I started documenting them, taking pictures, lining them up on the dining room table. 47. 47 identical keys, each a perfect clone of the last. They stared up at me, silent witnesses to my unraveling sanity. I stopped answering my phone. I didn't want to explain the unexplainable. How do you tell a friend, my house is breeding keys? They'd think I was losing it. Maybe I was. I'd sit at the table for hours, just staring at the collection. The polished brass seemed to mock me. They were keys, meant to open things, to provide access. But what did they open? I had only 2 locks in my house, the front door and the back door. I'd tested the first key I found. It didn't fit either. So 47 keys to what? They were symbols of access to places unknown, promises of entry into realms I couldn't comprehend. The loss of control was absolute. My home was no longer mine. It was a stage for this bizarre phenomenon. Every surface, every container, every forgotten corner could be hiding another one. The very act of living in my own space became an act of dread. Making coffee, getting dressed, reading a book all were punctuated by the potential discovery of another key. I felt watched, not by eyes, but by the sheer, oppressive presence of these objects. They were a constant reminder that the rules of my reality had been rewritten without my consent. My own memory was an unreliable narrator, and my home was a script I no longer recognized. One evening, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I gathered all the keys. There were 53 now. I put them in a heavy canvas bag. My plan was simple. drive to the bridge and throw them into the river. Reclaim my home, my mind. As I walked to the garage, my hand closed around the cold brass doorknob. But it wouldn't turn. It was locked. I never locked the door to the garage from the inside. I fumbled in my pocket for my house keys, my real keys. They weren't there. A cold, paralyzing fear washed over me. I looked at the doorknob again, and there, just below the knob, was a new lock. A small, dark keyhole I had never seen before. It hadn't been there this morning. My blood ran cold. My gaze slowly drifted down to the canvas bag in my hand. The weight of it suddenly felt immense. I knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, what I would find. My hand trembled as I reached into the bag and pulled out one of the 53 identical keys. I walked back to the front door. Another new lock, a twin to the one on the garage door. The bathroom, the bedroom, the closets, they were everywhere. Every door in my house now had a new, unfamiliar lock. My home hadn't been invaded by keys. It had been upgraded, changed. The keys weren't for somewhere else. They were for here. I stood in the hallway, the bag of keys in my hand, surrounded by doors I could no longer open with the keys I once owned. The house was the same, yet entirely different. It was a cage that had silently, patiently built itself around me. I was trapped, and the most terrifying part? I had a bag full of keys. Keys that promised entry, promised access. But they were no longer keys to my home. They were keys to my prison. I slid one into the new lock on the front door. It turned with a smooth, perfect click. I opened the door, not to the familiar street outside, but to a hallway identical to the one I was standing in, lined with more doors, each with its own identical waiting lock. I wasn't losing control. I never had it. I was just a part of the house's design, a resident in a maze that was only now revealing its true shape, and I had all the keys I would ever need. Thanks for watching. If this story found you, maybe it was meant to. Subscribe for more.